Hey guys, welcome to Tanks and Fish. Thanks for joining us here today. Today's topic is going to be about 5 tips to help you become a better fish keeper. Before we get into the video though, make sure you hit like and subscribe and leave your comments below. So the first thing I want to get into is tip number 1. Basically, these are in no particular order, just kind of rambling off on how I wrote them down. The first thing is, again, going to be time management. Time management is going to be very big if you plan on keeping fish tanks, especially if you plan on keeping multiple fish tanks. Time management, you need to know when to use your time and how to maximize your time when you spend it with your fish tanks. I know everybody has a busy life, so you always got to keep track of what you're doing when you're supposed to do things. A lot of people have very good memory. If you're like me, you don't. So basically having a calendar, a notepad, anything to write things down of when to do your water changes. If you have planted tanks, when to actually fertilize them and what you're actually fertilizing, what supplies you're using when. That'll help you keep and save a lot of time. That way you're not overdosing tanks or you're not overdoing a lot of the work that you've already done. So the biggest key is going to be time management. Learn to save your time so you can maximize the time you actually spend with your fish. Tip number 2 is going to be supplies, making sure you have the right amount of supplies in your inventory. Whether you have 1 tank or 1,000,000 tanks, you always got to make sure you have what you need at all times. Always be prepared, such as fertilizers, medications. Don't wait till you run out to go get more. Always have that backup just in case. You never know if you're going to run out over the weekend, or if you're going to be gone on vacation. You need to make sure you're properly stocked for whoever's going to be watching your equipment for you, your tanks, your fish, everything. So always be supplied very well, have a good inventory of what you have, and always keep track of it. That way, if you run low, you can always resupply before you run low. That's probably one of the biggest tips that I can probably offer you, is always have that back stock. Always have your supplies ready to go. Tip number 3 is going to be know your water. Know what's coming out of your faucet. If you're filling up your fish tank with your faucet water, always know what's in it. Always test your water. Make sure you know how it's changing and when it's changing. You don't want to be caught off guard with doing water changes and all of a sudden the city added something different to your water that you weren't aware of. And it just destroys your cycle. So you always want to be aware of what your water is and when. I would always recommend you test your water yourself at least once a month, just to make sure everything's still on par. Always test it before you fill up your fish tanks, and leave your water sitting out for a couple of days, and then test the water without it being in a fish tank, just to kind of see where your pH levels are and anything else you want to check, your hardness and whatnot. Tip number 4, and probably the most fun tip you're going to get, is going to be know your fish. Every time you sit there staring at your fish, if you're anything like me, I'll spend hours staring at my fish. But get to know your fish. Know their attitudes, their behaviors. Know what kind of foods they take more to, and just know how they behave on a day-by-day basis. You can always tell when a fish isn't feeling well when they're not taking food, especially some of their favorite foods. So get to know your fish, get to know their little quirks, their little habits. That'll just help you become a better fish keeper. In the long run, you'll be able to catch diseases that much faster, and you'll be able to know and basically keep track of the things that they like and don't like, and you can actually improve their diets by knowing more what they'll take more readily versus things that they'll not be as aggressive eating. So get to know your fish. Very important tip there for you. So tip number 5 is going to be always get first-hand experience. Just because it hasn't happened to you doesn't mean it can never happen to you. The more you know now, the better it's going to help you in the future. It's pretty much you're pretty much paying yourself dividends on that. Basically, you got to make sure you know how to deal with all kinds of common diseases in the fish world. Always read up on the fish that you're planning on getting or already have, and be ahead of that curve. Should something go wrong with your tank, you should know how to take care of that. Don't wait until the last minute when it's already happening and you're scrambling to get the information you need. Always be ahead. Always be well prepared to take care of pretty much anything that might be thrown your way. Of course, it's impossible to always be 100% prepared, but the more you know, the better you're off. Always write down everything you're doing. whether it be starting a plant a tank, knowing how to dose. Always keep track of those little things. Any experiments that you do, keep track of them. Pretty much the entire fish world, how it evolves is by experimenting. People pretty much writing things down and learning from their mistakes. Always get first-hand experience. I would always recommend to a new fish hobbyist, always join forums, watch a lot of videos, read all the forums you can, read all the magazine articles you can about fish keeping. Learn as much as you can, even if it doesn't pertain to you. If it doesn't pertain to you, especially read it, because you never know when you're going to run into that problem. Let's say you don't know how to deal with popeye, or you don't know how to deal with bloat, things like that. Don't wait till it happens to you. Know how to take care of your fish before you need to take care of them. Always research what kind of fish you're going to be getting into, what kind of diseases they're prone to. Always be ahead of the curve. Basically get to know what kind of fish you're going to be keeping by reading all their forums and anything that you can get your hands on. The more you know, the better you'll be prepared. A lot of things that you got to know about is what brands work for you. Just because you might have heard a forum say this brand works for somebody, it might not work for you. Always know what works for you. Always get that first-hand experience. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty and learn from your mistakes. If you're not learning from those mistakes and you're just immediately joining a different forum or running to a different thread, you're not learning anything. You got to make sure you're trying things out for yourself and keeping track of what you have tried, what is working, what isn't working. Get that first-hand experience. And with that, guys, that's pretty much the list of the top 5 tips I have for you on becoming a better fish keeper. Again, this is geared more towards beginner fish keepers to help them out get through that learning curve. If you like anything that pretty much I spoke about today, give me that like and subscribe. And anything you want to add to the list, go ahead and leave it in the comments below. So we'll check you guys on the next video, and we'll see you then.